Richie Mars, the Bloodline versus the Usos and Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel. Impromptu, it feels like. It feels like it's a little early, but for the course of a story, of course, they're doing this here at Crown Jewel. But anyways, before we jump into that, how are you, Richie?
Doing very well. How are you doing, Ryan?
Busy season, busy. Got my plumbing shirt on, my coaching hat on.
Mm.
No time to change. We're just jumping into these previews and banging them out, Richie. But do you agree with the sentiment that I am saying? It's a little early from a I don't know story aspect to have a match, but it feels like is a building block to the ultimate goal.
It's a necessary evil. You know what I mean? You got to establish the bloodline versus OG bloodline conflict, and you need to do that in a match. And because as much as people love those long bloodline segments, you gotta have at least one match in there to kind of cause some tension, and then you blow it off at where I think we both think this whole thing is gonna culminate.
Yeah, 7 matches on Crown Jewel,
Hmm.
wild card of a thing, right?
Yeah,
You it's kinda crazy if you think about it, right? We've
yeah.
been humming at 5 for these BPLEs, and there's nothing that screams BPLE like Crown Jewel. Are you surprised by the 7-match structure?
Yes and no. Like I'm always I'm always like, hey, if it makes sense to be on the show, be on the show. But with Crown Jewel, you want to get all your heavy hitters in, your all your usuals, so to speak, for the Crown Jewel shows. You get your Cody match, your Roman match, your LA Knight match, your
Yeah.
Randy match, your Nia Liv match, your tag team match. You have all these match quotas that you're filling up. So, I'm surprised by it, but at the same time, I'm not really that surprised.
Yeah, so in the grand scheme of things, sure, why not? I think it's, more of a quantity approach this time around than a quality approach if you kinda look at the card. Like, Nia Liv is probably one of the worst matches on a pay-per-view or a PLE this year, really, just from a kind of stylistic standpoint. And then the Cody and the Gunther is yeah, it's kind of a low-key dream match, but it's also kind of tarnished by a kind of pointless thing. So this definitely adds some quality to it. And let's kind of dive into it. Let's before we dive into it, Richie, there's 4 guys to the right of us of this match graphic. Which one do you suspect not to be in the match?
Tongaloa.
Right? Poor Tongalo, right? It kind of makes sense not to, right? There's no, I think the biggest lock is Tama Tonga,
Hmm.
just because like he's like the perfect blend between all guys. He bumps wells, he's menacing, he
Hmm.
kind of looks the part, and he's kind of good enough to be there and be the stooge, right?
Hmm.
And Tongaloa is like a legit stooge, and he might fuck up every other spot. So Tama Tonga's the glue. It's like does Solo present himself? Oh, and then Jacob Fatu, do they save him for War Games? So it's kind of like, yeah, I think it's Tamatanga is out, but I can see kind of other ventures as well besides Tamatanga being the kind of lock, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think the team that's it's gonna be Solo, it's gonna be Jacob, and it's gonna be Tamatonga with Tongaloa being like his self, like similar to Money in the Bank.
Yeah,
Just kind of being the heavy, so to speak. And then it will showcase. I really do think that this is probably like a make or break to see like how people's perception of this Solo Sokoa version of the Bloodline is.
yeah. Honestly, they need it. I think they're gonna win it. Just a
Mhm.
spoiler before preview's over. I think they're gonna win it. But anyways, yeah. I want to kind of, I mentioned that because I kind of want that theme as we kind of meld through it with my opinion being in that they kind of have to win it and they should win it in my
Mhm.
opinion at Crown Jewel.
Yeah.
And but first, getting there, Usos title reign for 5 weeks. I thought it was more of a tip of the cap to him. I
Mhm.
think it was warranted, of course, and I thought it was still a successful reign for sure. It doesn't really hurt Braun Breaker, but with the bloodline ending it, and then the acceleration of the machine guns getting the title shot after just winning it, and the bloodline kind of feeling themselves. What do you think of that week-long storyline last week where Jay Uso loses his belt and the Tongans lose their tag title belts, and that's kind of a way to kind of muddy the waters into this crown jewel match and really kind of accelerate the beef into, well, the constant beef into the here and the now. What'd you think of that?
Well, not only is it a classic like eye for an eye kind of story, like you cost me my title, I cost you yours. It's really indicative of Jey Uso's entire singles run, where he won the title without his family, and but he lost his championship because of his family. If you want to go that way, so it's a nice little, like, neat little
Wait.
tip of the cap to Jay, like you said, where it's just like, okay, like, we gave him his moment, but now, like, this moment is just kind of fleeting because of how short it was, and it was cost by the new bloodline, where we had Solo trying to quote unquote help Jay, but at the same time, you still have all these underlying tensions and seeds between possibly both teams. I think it's going to be more on the Roman side than it is the Solo side, because Jacob did cost Jay excuse me, yeah, Jacob did cost Jay the match, and that wasn't an order from Solo because Solo was trying to help Jay, but maybe it's looked down upon, maybe it's maybe they play off of that, maybe they don't, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I like the important detail where Solo didn't go cost him. He tried to like play it off like he was trying to help him, kind of recruit
Hmm.
him, so on
Hmm.
and so forth. Where it's like, why would Solo just kind of go pick a scab, right? When
Right.
he's trying to kind of meld the bloodline over in a way into his vision. So I kind of like how they had the attention to details there. Or probably in past regimes would just go out there and have him cost it and oh, that's the match. I like the attention to detail of like what he was thinking as a leader of the new bloodline.
Hmm.
All right, Jay is back with his brother Jimmy. Do you like how we got there? Do you think that they had enough like remorse, enough kind of, well, at the end of the day, we're real blood. We fought each other at WrestleMania. You could feel that at WrestleMania, the week leading in, they had these big plans for the rest of the 2024 laid out. And
Hmm.
that's perhaps why we didn't go out there and have a crazy match at WrestleMania. It was more of a straightforward SmackDown match in like 2015, where we just had a Raw match and we're going to have the rematch on SmackDown. And it really doesn't mean anything. They
Hmm.
had a very lackluster WrestleMania match, and I felt that they didn't really want to get too deep in the weeds of brotherly hate.
Hmm.
More of a respect kind of thing is what I've got coming out of that match, right? And what I felt in the match, and the blood feud leading into that didn't really call for that, but that's why that match at WrestleMania was off. But now seeing it 200 days later, Cody spoiler, he just 200 days as champ.
Hmm.
Um, 200 days later, they are here together. Do you think that they did enough on TV in the last 2 to 3 weeks to kinda make us feel like, "Okay, I see it." Like, I get why they're back together.
TV, you could always make the argument that it could have been built better, because again, since they were both on different brands and Jimmy just returned recently, you're not going to have that traditional build-up
Yeah.
of that reunition. One of the promos before that WrestleMania match, Jay said that he wanted to team with Jimmy again. So on
Mhm.
Jay's part, there was always not really any, like, there was animosity, but again, it's like that brotherly animosity. And I think one of the main reasons why their match failed is I don't think it's very easy to do the brother versus brother or sister versus sister rivalry, because I think that's a little bit too real for the wrestling fans, with the exclusion being Brett and Owen. And
For real.
if you wanted to do like kayfabe brothers, Taker or Kane,
Yeah.
but it's like, because it's like, I feel like when you bring like the real life family involved, that's when it kind of gets a little muddied, especially when it's brothers. I think because with the tension with Roman and the twins, I think there was more left out of that. And I think it's one of those where it's like no one was really clamoring for a Jay versus Jimmy kind of match. And as far as them coming up to this moment, I mean, it's believable. It's like not only are they brothers, they're twins,
Yeah.
so it's just like one of those things where no one's gonna know what a twin bond is, unless it's like the two individuals in that set. So it's like, from a narrative standpoint, there could have been a lot more build, but from, I think, like a reality standpoint, it's like it's your twin. You're always going to have that connection with them.
Yeah, I like that they highlighted they know who Jay is and they know who Jimmy is now. So us going apart for the last year or so really was a good definition of who we are as individuals. And now we're even bigger individuals coming kind of to get back together. And the Usos are probably going to be bigger than ever coming back together. And
Mm.
I like that Jay had that single success at the tail end of his solo run, just assuming that they are back together as a tag team here on out. And I'm not sure if they actually
No,
are,
I
really.
don't think so. I think it's just like, kind of like a water under the bridge kind of thing, at least when the Usos are concerned. Because again, they're still different brands. I think like people like really underestimate Jay monetarily because Jay's merchandise sales are uber crazy.
Mhm.
And I think like you just don't put them back in the tag team ranks permanently. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just
they can
like,
flirt with it. Yeah, I don't
yeah,
think so, but I like that now that they come back together, it means more in it. The
yeah,
Usos names feels kinda bigger.
yeah,
Alright,
absolutely.
alright, do you Roman Reigns, was his transitions with Jay was his transition with Jimmy just felt like enough? Just, it
I
was
mean,
like, we didn't have necessarily have beef, he was kind of his whipping boy, but
yeah.
then he's always kinda had his back, so it didn't really much of a bridge to have to build back up.
No, yeah, with Roman and Jimmy, like that was never in question. Like Roman never treated Jimmy the greatest, but Jimmy's like one of those loyal like soldiers, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it's like even though he was the first to turn on Roman, he was the first one to come back just because, whether if you want to do like character insecurity, whether you wanted to go like character wise, where it's just like he was there just to protect Jay. Like you could go many different directions with it. But I think Roman and Jimmy are more believable because Jimmy's the one that's like kind of been there, even throughout like all the fighting. That he's the one that's always like cooler heads prevailed. That's kind of like bringing everything together as we're seeing happen on television right now. So I think Roman and Jimmy's like, yeah, their relationship's believable.
Yeah, so in retrospect here, Jimmy, rekindling with Jay first, kind of accepting Sammy first,
Hmm.
staying loyal to Roman. Jimmy's the character is pretty defined, right? It's not as the ceiling isn't as high as Jay's, but he is a pretty pivotal piece within the bloodline. So, and then it's going to lead to this Friday night on SmackDown where Jimmy brings Jay and Roman together. I like
Hmm.
that they went to Monday Night Raw and did that the other night
Hmm.
and kinda wove them together and, kinda really set up the inevitable return, and of course, they're gonna come return and accept each other, spoiler.
Hmm.
I think even if you didn't read the spoilers, there's a
I mean,
match right here that they have to be on the same.
match was announced, so
The
it's
match
like
was
almost.
announced, so
I think the underlining of it, all of it is like the Jay and Roman relationship, and I think that's going to be the reason why they lose the Crown Jewel match because as Roman was acknowledging Solo, and Solo says Roman hasn't changed. That's true. Roman said he when he returned, he did not change. So I
yeah.
think there's going to be a point in the match where Roman's going to get heated at Jay, and Jay is going to see that as a sign of disrespect and walk out. Leading to the loss of Roman Reigns, Jimmy, and Jay. And then we're to spend these next couple weeks kind of rebuilding all these relationships just in time for war games. So then it's like at the apex, then you could have like your Avengers moment where it's like everybody is on the same page, and then you're at war games.
Yeah, and being on Raw last night, they also reintroduced Sami Zayn to this. Even though a month or so ago, they kind of were like, all right, Jay and Sammy, let's kind of team up again, right? And then
Mhm.
Jay goes on to win the Intercontinental title, and Sammy does not win the World Heavyweight title. But
Mhm.
now they are back together kind of on screen, and Sammy is kind of, why are you going back down that road again, right?
Mhm.
And I had your back, but I don't really understand because I'm not your blood, even though we are quote unquote brothers, right?
Mhm.
And I guess blood is thicker than water and sweat and tears that Sammy and Jay have been through. And I guess he'll never understand, but of course, he's his friend. And to his core, he will understand when the time comes. And when the time
Mhm.
comes, I believe that they will call on him and it will be just fine and rosy.
Hmm.
But I'm very curious of the dynamic between Sammy and Roman because Sammy is the one that chose to leave the bloodline by not striking Kevin Owens in the back at the Royal Rumble 2022 and really pinballing that whole run. And he was the one that kind of put the chair in the back of Roman Reigns, and he has rehabbed himself mentally to not be this broken character, and it has really elevated him up the card and from a kayfabe aspect, right? So, what will he really be and do there? Will he kind of rest on his laurels and go back with Jay and his friends, or will he just kind of tutu? I think we know what's going to happen, but I'm very curious of how we get there. Because, like you said, the road is a windy road, or do they go with the straight ahead approach, which just says more miles on it? So I'm really not sure, but I'm very invested.
Yeah, with Sammy, it's always going to add a little wrinkle into everything, and I think people are mixed on it, whether you like Sami Zayn's role in the Bloodline or not, because I think people strictly just wanted to be about the actual blood of the family. But that's kind of like the story, right? With Sammy, he's always like the honorary Uce, and that pretty much was the elevation of his entire career in WWE. So
Yeah.
I think Sammy is going to have Jay's back, because it's like that's what friends are, it's like you gotta be loyal. And I think with Sammy, I think he will understand because who knows more about betrayals than Sami Zayn.
Yeah.
But
And
you, you know,
rekindling.
yeah, so it's like it's gonna be very interesting to see how all these parts connect.
So we saw Kevin Owens absolutely freak out. Not to go too down a rabbit hole, but just a yes or no answer
Mhm,
from you here. We saw Kevin Owens freak out with Cody Rhodes,
mhm,
right, and Randy Orton.
mhm,
And the tipping point for him was, why are you helping Roman Reigns? Why are you
mhm.
in messing with the bloodline? They made our life hell. Do we see Kevin Owens with Sami Zayn from a TV aspect at any point in the next whatever months or weeks that Sami is involved with the bloodline? Or is it kind of like, all right, we're just going to ignore that and let that be for now?
I mean, I don't think they're gonna ignore it. I think there's gonna be like teases for it, an outright attack. I think you could definitely do it at one of these PLE shows, where it will happen. I think you could do possibly like a Saturday night's main event. You could do a Royal Rumble, like kind of tease with everything. So I think we'll see it down the line, but I don't think it's gonna be quite so soon.
All right, I don't even think it's worth, Richie, to kind of go delve into the new bloodline here. I think Solo has kind of found his role here as the leader.
Mhm.
It's probably maybe not as high as they wanted it to be, but I think he's settled into a strong position. But I think the future still is strong with Jacob Fatu as your eventual leader of the bloodline. And I'm not sure where that leaves Solo, but I guess we'll find out. However, my question with you is, I have the vibe that you are on the same page that with me with the OG bloodline taking the loss here leading into War Games. Which member of the new bloodline will pin the OG bloodlines and which OG will get pinned?
I got Solo pinning Roman with this one.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's like
That's crazy, Richie.
let's be honest, Solo's bloodline and Solo in general hasn't been looking the strongest. And in order to establish how serious of a threat they are, especially if they're winning, you have Solo pin Roman here, because that still holds a lot of weight. Pinning
It
Roman is a
does.
big deal. And I think that's how you have to come across. You have to have Solo be at least instrumental in the finish, if not pick up the win. And then you have Roman realize that his own actions caused the downfall of his own reunition because, he still is that little tribal chief at heart. So then it's going to be like a whole Vision Quest like journey to finally atone for his sins. And I don't think the Bloodline reunion will be full force in Roma's direction unless he atones for everything that he's done in the past.
And lead by example, right? So,
Mhm.
I like that. I think Roman is going to kind of eat a lot of humble pie here. And there's no other way to humble him with a pinfall here from a humanizing standpoint, because he was inhuman for what, 4 years. So, and that he was isolated with all these guys. So if he wants all these guys on his side again, he needs to kind of these guys have leveled up, right? So
Yeah.
Roman needs to show that he's able to kind of level down to bring everyone back up because he always brought everyone up as your tribal chief. So I think that there is probably the most likely scene. I kind of agree, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jay or Jimmy just took the L from Fatu.
All right.
Now, would it carry more weight if Fatu pinned Roman, or we ain't there yet?
It'd carry more weight for Jacob. It wouldn't really do much for Solo because there's already a perception that Jacob's better than Solo. And I think if you give that to Jacob, yeah, it's going to help him a lot. But for Solo, it's not going to do that much for him. I think Solo pinning Roman would do a lot more for him than Jacob pinning Roman because people expect Jacob to be in that position already. With Solo, he's still kind of like, he's finding his groove, like you said, but now it's the time where it's just go. It's just go. You have to
Yeah.
establish Solo as a threat like Jay and everybody else has been building him up to be, and that's what you got to do.
I would look into Jacob pitting him just because the long game of it. Uh, if it's Cody Rock at
Mhm.
WrestleMania, a Roman Reigns match could easily be Jacob Fatu, right?
Mhm.
And you're playing the long game there. A pinfall here in early November would do probably good justice in five or so months. Where Solo, I don't think there's enough juice on there to have a solo Roman Reigns WrestleMania match. Even though
Right.
I think that they projected to maybe want to for a backup Roman Reigns WrestleMania match, but that feels like Saturday night's main event, or that feels like Royal Rumble at best. Um, in my opinion,
Mhm.
I wouldn't waste it. Solo already pinned Cody, right? And I know Roman is a little bit above Cody, not from a
Mhm.
pecking order standpoint, but from a vulnerability standpoint. Cody, you know, he's the champ. He can, he's fine. He's right. But
Mhm.
Roman, I think the pinfall should mean a lot more. I just don't think Solo Sikoa will ever be on that level to make it mean that. And a
Right.
pin wasted here is closer to Baron Corbin pinning Roman Reigns than maybe Cody Rhodes pinning Roman Reigns. So I don't know. I would go Jacob just for the long game of it all, and in being Solo has leveled to whatever he's at, really, in my opinion. So
Mhm.
I'm not against Roman getting pinned. I just wouldn't waste it on Solo.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, yeah. It's just one of those things where it's like they need to kind of put the spark in this right away. So
No, for
that's
sure.
what
I
that.
understand your sentiment. I understand your
Yeah.
logic for sure. I just would garnish more of a Roman Reigns pin.
Right.
I think you
Mhm.
see how valuable it is, right? So,
Yeah.
that's just me. All right, Richie. Well, revamp today,
Mhm.
retold and relived Riffy Mars.
Mhm.
Speaking of Cody pinning Roman Reigns, why don't you tell
Mhm.
us what's
Yeah.
going on with your podcast and the
Yeah.
reboot?
So latest episode is an audio documentary on The Rock and his recent return because it's been in the works for a lot longer than people think through many different sources, and it's like we get to talk about during the episode what WrestleMania The Rock almost appeared on allegedly. We have talks about like The Rock's claims, and then you have the backstage claims about what's going on and how the whole perception of The Rock coming in and taking Cody Rhodes' spot in the main event and to see if there was like any malicious intent or it's just one of the worst cases of reading the room in history. So it's about a 30-minute audio documentary and it just goes through the first party sources by like everybody telling their opinion on the story that we have so far. And yeah, I think it's a good listen because one, I did it, but it's like has quotes from The Rock, his writer Brian Gewirtz, who was also
I was gonna
the
bring
head
that up.
writer of
I was
Monday
gonna
Night
bring
Raw.
up the interesting
Uh,
Gerwart's feelers
yeah,
that I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, that's a good pull by Richie." That he
yeah.
pulled that was well researched, and of course, always retold well with
Mhm,
Richie Mars. And yeah, I didn't know about the Gerwart's feelers
mhm,
around. Hey, The Rock might be feeling this. What's your
mhm,
plans coming out of WrestleMania
mhm,
39? And then The Rock kind of seeing the writing on the wall for himself to get in the spot where he's at. We
mhm.
won't spoil the
Yeah,
podcast. Let's just say it's in depth and Richie does a great job. So check it
yeah.
out, guys.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone checks it out. That's Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars.
Awesome. So check it out, guys. We'll see you on the next one, Richie.
Thank you.